Hello, welcome to our money-saving gas and electricity Q&A. We've been swamped with your questions that Rose is going to put to me in a moment. Do ensure you've read the article first, though, because that has all the meat. We're just the bread in the sandwich on top of it all. Rose, what have you got for me?
Jade wants to know how and where do I find the best deals on the market?
Use a comparison site, specifically a consumer-focused, confidence-approved comparison site. You could do it yourself in a spreadsheet, and that would probably be more accurate, as comparison sites do make assumptions, and that's a little bit annoying. But for most people, just put in where you live and how much you use in one of the approved comparison sites, and it'll tell you who your cheapest provider is. There's lots more info about doing that in the article, plus it informs you how to get cash back on top. Of course, we're only listing people who approve comparison sites there, and you might get up to 30 quid on top by going via the Money Saving Expert article rather than going direct, as effectively they're trying to fight for your custom, Money Savers custom on top. We've made them do that, whereas if you go to their sites directly, they don't need to.
John's asked, should I switch to a fixed tariff?
It's a very difficult question, John, and there are two pieces of logic you need to take into account when deciding this. The first is prevailing market conditions. If it is likely gas and electricity prices are going to go up, and you'll often hear this in the news and we'll bring it to you in the weekly email as well, then by fixing, you effectively lock in at today's prices and avoid any price rises. So then it's a good idea. Yet completely separately to that, just like with a fixed rate mortgage, you also have to look at your own finances. And if you could not risk prices rising, even if that doesn't look likely for the moment, it may be worth considering fixing effectively as an insurance policy against it happening when you need it for the security of knowing what you're going to pay. It is worth noting, though, that most people who are on a standard tariff will be able to save money dropping to a fixed rate tariff, but they could save even more by going to the very cheapest tariffs out there. So you are paying a premium for getting a fix, which, if prices didn't go up, would mean it wasn't the cheapest deal for you. But of course, if prices do go up and you're still down there, you're saving money.
Claire, Alison and Martin will want to know, are there any options for lowering LPG and heating oil bills for people who live in rural areas?
It is an incredibly difficult thing to do. The most important thing is collective purchasing. Go and talk to your neighbours and other people maybe in your village where you live and see if you can gang together and then bulk order your oil or your LPG. That really does bring the price down. I've heard lots of great stories from people who are doing that. Otherwise, you're just not big enough to be able to demand competition. You probably only have one supplier where you live. Whereas if you're actually negotiating, then you can go to other suppliers and say, you know what, there's 50 of us. It's worth you sending a special truck to come and deliver our oil. So collective purchasing is the best way when it comes to heating oil.
And by the way, lots of people are asking, why aren't they regulated?
Because they should be regulated and they're not. I've even mentioned this to the Consumer Minister, actually. I know that the Office of Fair Trading are looking at it as I record this video. Hopefully that will happen, but when the time you watch it, I've also spoken to a number of MPs who are trying to lobby in Parliament for a change to that. Unfortunately, heating oil isn't regulated at the moment. It should be. Fingers crossed it will change.
What's a social tariff and who gets one?
They're special cheap tariffs for people who don't have that much money, whether you're on benefits or you're a pensioner. The exact specifications depend on the company, so you need to talk to your gas and electricity supplier to see if you're eligible. What I would say, though, is don't assume that social tariffs are necessarily the cheapest tariffs. Often online deals will undercut them, so it's worth checking that out, because if you're watching this, you are online. And I'm afraid they are phasing social tariffs out over the next 4 years as well, in favour of, I think it's called warm home discounts. So I don't know how much longer they're here to stay.
Malcolm's asked, is it true you can change tariff to another supply at any time with no penalties?
No, that isn't true. Provided you're not locked in, you can change tariff without any penalties, assuming you're not on a prepayment meter. But you may have a fixed or a discount tariff that locked you in for 18 months or so with an exit penalty if you leave, in which case they can't charge you the exit penalty. It might be 100 quid maximum type thing.
I moved into a new build flat 4 years ago and have never received an electricity bill. What should I do now?
That's a very, very bad question, because it means, frankly, they can come and chase you for the money for up to 6 years. The only excuse is if you've done everything you can to notify them and they've not billed you in over a year, then there's a voluntary code that stops them billing you. So you are going to owe this money. There's a meter point hotline for gas, but you're going to need to contact your regional electricity company, the one that's sort of the incumbent in your area, to see who provides your electricity. Get in touch with them as soon as possible. I'm afraid if you've used the electricity, they can bill you for it. You need to get in touch with them and try and sort it out. Hopefully, if they've had a fault is on their hand, they will give you a reasonable payment terms and spread the cost. But unfortunately, it doesn't mean you're getting away with it generally.
If you have a prepayment meter and want to change to a standard meter, how much will it cost to change, and is there any way of avoiding a charge?
It can cost up to £150 to change, which is a real shame, as people on prepayment meters are generally charged more than other forms, and they tend to be the poorest in society. It's a very bad system that I don't approve of. You may be able, if you have no debt with the company, to talk to your gas and electricity company and say, look, you know what, I'm a decent customer. If you don't give me a better deal, I'm going to ditch and switch, and they may wipe the fee then.
If I want to transfer to a different tariff with the same supplier, can I do it on a comparison site to get cash back or wine?
Clever question. The answer is you may be able to, because sometimes comparison sites only give you cash back if they're paid by the energy provider when you switch. And sometimes they do get that for retaining customers. So if they get cash, they'll give you cash. It's wishy-washy. It just depends on the tariff.
We're going to move on to some quick-fire questions now, Martin. Where do I go to complain over energy disputes?
You go to the Ombudsman service. It used to be called the Energy Ombudsman. Frankly, any dispute you've had with a company, you first complain to the company, and then if you're not getting what you consider to be justice, then take it to the free Ombudsman service, and they can tell the power companies if they think they're wrong to pay up and to sort it all out.
I have prepayment meters as I have a debt that's automatically being paid back weekly when I top up. Can I switch to another supplier?
Yes, you can switch on prepayment meters. Uswitch and Energy Helpline include comparisons for it, provided your debt that you talked about is less than 200 quid.
I've just moved into a new home and don't know the previous usage. How do I get the best deal?
Of course, it's more difficult, but just use one of the comparison sites. They will enable you to say roughly how many bedrooms and what type of energy usage you've got, and it'll give you an estimate. Won't be the perfect answer, but it will mean probably your cheaper supplier will be one of the top 3 that they mention, and it'll likely be a lot cheaper than the one that you're already paying, so you should still save doing that. And then in a year's time, do another comparison once you've got accurate details.
If I already have solar panels, is the feed-in tariff going to be removed?
Well, if you already have the panels, the government said the tariff will last for 25 years, i.e. you'll be paid to generate your electricity. But there is something known as the omnicompetence of Parliament, which means even though a government guarantees it now, it could in the future change its mind retrospectively because any Parliament has power over previous Parliaments. But I think that's unlikely to happen. That's my sort of legalese if and but. But generally, I think that if you've already got solar panels, your feed-in tariff's here to stay.
Can energy companies transfer me from one tariff to another without telling me?
No, they need to notify you, but they can transfer you to one tariff to another. What commonly happens, especially at the end of a fix, is they'll roll you onto either a standard tariff or sometimes lock you into another fix with only a month to get out of it. So you always need to keep on top of what tariff you're on, but they will notify you. If ever you get the notification letter, act! Act quickly, do a comparison, ditch and switch. It'll almost certainly not be a cheap tariff they're moving you to.
What's the cost of breaking out of a fixed deal?
Generally, it's £20 to £40 per fuel, so that could be up to £80 if you've got both gas and electricity with them.
How long should it take before my supply switches over?
Usually about 4 to 6 weeks. If it takes over 3 months, there's a problem getting contact.
Am I entitled to a refund for credit on a keycard meter when I move?
Yes, generally, if you notify the company that you've got credit left, they should be able to close off your account and give you some of the money back. Usually is my answer, usually.
If I move house during a fixed contract, do I have to take my provider with me?
You don't have to take it with you, but you can usually take it with you, which is good if you've locked into a very cheap contract. Having said that, if you're moving to a different region which has got different prices for the same fixed tariff, that does happen, then you will be moved to that new region's tariff.
If my meter breaks, what are companies entitled to bill me for?
They're entitled to bill you what they consider to be a reasonable amount based on previous estimates. If you don't consider that's reasonable, go to the Ombudsman service.
Is there a set amount of time I must have a prepayment meter for?
No, there's no set amount of time, but if you've been in debt or you've had credit history problems, they're going to generally keep you on that prepayment tariff.
And I think that's all we've got time for, Martin.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Rose. Hope those answers helped.